James Franklin's best class? Well, we're going to find out. We go to our source here with Marty Leap and Tim Aiden from Black Shoe Diaries. They host our post game here at the Voice of College Football for Penn State. And, of course, join them over on Black Shoe Diaries on SB Nation. Hey, guys, how's it going?
Pretty good, Mark. Yeah, definitely can't complain.
Well, there you go. Right out of the gate, we've got the numbers posted on the screen. Is this going to be the best class? And of course, we're taking out the projection of what's actually going to happen on the field. We're just talking about high school football talent. I know that it's been thrown out there that this could possibly be, and James Franklin's had some really good ones, the best class.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, I definitely think it has the potential to be. It finished slightly below the 2018 recruiting class in terms of just overall ranking. I think they both finished ranked 6th in the country, if I remember correctly, but this class's overall score was a tick lower. That 2018 class, for those who don't know, was the likes of Micah Parson, Odafe Owe, Rasheed Walker, who's probably going to be a high pick in this spring's draft, guys of that nature. The reason I think this class has the potential to be the best James Franklin assigned over that 2018 class is largely due to the quarterback position. No knock on Will Levis whatsoever. He obviously has put together a pretty solid college career between Penn State and Kentucky, but he was the quarterback in the 2018 class. The quarterback in this class, and I know anyone who's listened to Tim and I have heard us mention his name ad nauseum, especially, in the back half of this past season when quarterback became such an issue for Penn State. Drew Aller is, by the accounts of a lot of people who know a heck of a lot more about football and quarterback play than I do, the best high school football quarterback in the country. 247 Sports has him ranked as number 1 quarterback in the country and the number 3 overall player in the country on their composite ranking. So, taking their ranking, rivals, ESPN, all of that, they have him as the number 3 quarterback in the country. So obviously everybody's extremely high on this kid. And I think he's probably the real deal breaker that could make this class better than that 18 class. Now, that 18 class also definitely produced some good talent for Penn State, but a lot of the top end talent really didn't hit. Ricky Slade and Justin Shorter, 2 composite 5-stars who didn't pan out. Micah Parsons obviously panned out, but Penn State only got 2 seasons of him. Owe really was turning a corner towards the end of his Penn State career. So while I think talent-wise, the classes are probably pretty close to being equal, I think this class can prove to be better on the field and accomplish more for the Nittany Lions, largely because of the quarterback. And, as we'll get into later, they've got impact players in almost every position, including important positions such as edge rusher, and running back. But yeah, when you have a quarterback like Drew Aller, that goes a long way. 247 Sports has his comparison as Josh Allen for a reason. That's a quarterback like that can mask up a lot of warts for your team and win you a lot of football games.
Yeah, I think just to add on to what Marty said, I agree fully. I think Drew Aller is what makes, in my opinion, this the best class that James Franklin has brought into Penn State, even though, as I noted in the private chat, the 2018 class, the overall average of the recruits was higher. But if you're talking about as far as impact player, like importance, as far as Penn State getting over the hump, beating Ohio State, winning the Big Ten championship, getting the playoff, kind of like, what Michigan did this past season. They want to do that. I feel like it starts at the quarterback position, and Drew Aller is the guy to do that. But I guess, to add on too, you did harp on, Ricky Slade and Justin Shorter than pan out. I don't know about you. I'm pretty hopeful that Nick Singleton and Caden Saunders will not be the next Ricky Slade and Justin Shorter. They will actually live up to their billing, and especially from what Singleton has shown in the All-Star Army All-American game, similar to Aller, and just also apparently what he's done in workouts so far since getting on campus. It sounds like he's the real deal, and he's a guy that similar to what Saquon Barkley did in 2015 as a true freshman. I think he can come in there and, he can definitely grab that starting role by the horns. Maybe he and I know you and I, Marty, have probably harped on this so many times doing our post-game shows, but maybe he and Kevon Lee could be like that, lightning thunder combination at running back. And they say Kevon Lee won't feel the need to try to maybe he won't try to bounce outside so much and try to get the edge. Like he'll resort to being the north-south, power through, pick up those extra yards kind of runner that he showed himself to be in 2020. And then, Caden Saunders, I think he's a guy, even though Penn State, I think, is in a good place receiver-wise, especially bringing in Mitchell Tinsley from the transfer portal. I think he's one of those guys, if he's as talented as he is, they're going to find a way to get him on the field. Either get him some reps at receiver or, I could see him being dangerous in the return game, either returning kicks or returning punts. So, of course, with John Dotson no longer returning punts, and who knows what other players, skilled players, going to end up hitting the portal after the spring. But there's opportunities for Caden to get on the field. So I know we're just touching the surface of this class, but I just wanted to echo that I do share in your excitement.
Yeah,
the only schools that I can think of, and I think this is pretty easy to back up, that rank top 5 to 10 in the nation, but haven't produced that on the field, are all in the South, or they're in recruiting hotbeds. Texas, LSU, disappointing seasons, but still they got talent on every street block, and they bring them in, and that's what it is. Penn State coming off 4-5 and 7-6, so 11-11. Their last 2 seasons seems to be an aberration in regards to still bringing in top classes, especially this one. Last year's may have taken a bit of a step back, but still was a top 15 class, something in that range. That this class, number 6 in the country, despite 2 decidedly off seasons.
Yeah, I think that speaks volumes to James Franklin, his staff, their abilities, recruiters. I think you mentioned, Mark, the previous class that kind of took a bit of a step back, and a big part of that was the lack of visits. This is one thing that Brian Doan, who's a national recruiting analyst for 247 Sports, mentions repeatedly, and Steve Wiltfong, who is the director of national recruiting for 247 Sports, mentions also. There are a few schools where getting kids on campus is more important than Penn State. I think when a lot of people think of Penn State and they're not totally off by this, think of it being a school out in the middle of nowhere in the mountains of Pennsylvania, which, I mean, Tim, you can attest to that also. That's basically what it is, but that doesn't change the fact that when you get to State College, it is a tremendous college town. That town revolves around the university, around the football program, and kids constantly talk about the family atmosphere and that they get from James Franklin and his staff when on campus. And I think being able to have those visits again really helped. Because you look at this class, yes, a big portion of it was in place. Was in place before visits were permitted again. But getting those kids on campus when visits started up again went a long way towards solidifying their commitments. Getting guys like a Denai Dennis Sutton, who's a 5-star pass rusher, like a Nick Singleton on campus for official visits, helped get them in this class. And even before that, last season, the 2020 season, when players couldn't visit, there were multiple weekends where commits got together in town somewhere to watch games on TV. And I think that also really helped getting them together. And that goes a long way for Penn State. You mentioned, Mark, some of these schools in the South where you could throw a stone from your front porch and probably hit the front door of 3 or 4 4-star kids. Penn State doesn't have that. Pennsylvania is not, I know historically Pennsylvania is one of the best states in the country for football talent. It's not that anymore. Pennsylvania is a state that is a dying state. People are moving out, and in turn, the football talent's going down. So Penn State has to go out of state to really recruit. Now, to their credit, they really hit the DMV hard, and that is one of the most talent-rich areas in the country, and James Franklin's always recruited that well. But the biggest thing for Penn State is
in the DMV area.
Yeah, just
top-notch football talent here. Like you got schools from literally, not just Penn State and big, but you got like SEC programs coming through here, getting kids out of, DC and the surrounding, schools in Maryland, Virginia.
Yeah, and I think, just look at this cycle. Look at Denai Dennis Sutton from McDonough School in Maryland. Bama and Georgia were after that kid hard, and Penn State had to fight their tails off to beat this wasn't a recruitment where he picked Penn State over Alabama and Georgia, but couldn't commit to Alabama and Georgia. Alabama and Georgia wanted the kid, and it's just Penn State staff deserves a lot of credit for when they get kids on campus. They are very difficult to beat in the recruitment, and I think that's a big reason why we saw, even coming off of the 2 poor seasons on the field, this class really tick up. And one other thing also with that, don't think for a second this coaching staff wasn't telling kids, yeah, we were 7-6 this year, but imagine if Sean Clifford didn't get hurt. And yeah, we were 4-5 last year, but there was COVID and we couldn't practice, and we lost Journey Brown and we lost Micah Parsons. They're not totally wrong for saying those things either. Those obviously were all major factors the last 2 seasons. But yeah, ultimately it just comes down to the staff does a tremendous job once they get players on campus, and we definitely saw that this cycle.
I don't think there's any question anybody with half a brain that watches college football could watch this team play the Wisconsin game, the Michigan game, the Iowa game, the Ohio State game, and they're better than a 7-6 team. It was still one of the 15 or 20 best teams in the country. So I would argue that with anyone, regardless of the record. Is there anything in particular in regards to any other themes, any other narratives, or specific players that you guys wanted to hit on?
I guess the thing I was going to point out was they did get one more kid for the 22 class, Vega. I don't say his last name, Ione, out of Graham, Washington. 6'4", 320-pound inside offensive lineman. Managed to get him away from UW, which to me is quite the haul. And as Marty was alluding to, kid that they got on campus. Once they got him on campus, showed him what State College, what Penn State's all about, that whole family community aspect of things. Obviously, it must have clicked enough of him to want to come from the Pacific Northwest all the way to here. I was thinking to myself in the back of my head the last time we got a kid out of Washington State, and Mac Morrison, who played linebacker in the late 90s, is the only name that comes to mind. So, again, great job by Franklin and staff for landing that kid.
Yeah, I think Ione is a great example of why it's important to get these kids on campus for Penn State. He was committed to Washington for a long time, decommitted with the coaching staff change, and when Washington kept the offensive line coach, all signs pointed to him still signing with the Huskies. But he officially visited Penn State last week, and that visit swung it in favor of the Nittany Lions. You look at this class. There's a lot of players alike. We've touched on Denai Dennis Sutton, 5-star defensive end, and especially Manny Diaz's defense, the way he likes to attack off the edge. I expect Dennis Sutton to make an immediate impact. I would also argue that was the biggest recruiting win of the James Franklin era, to beat out Georgia and Alabama, especially when during the summer, you see this a lot of recruitment. The team that gets the last visit wins. Penn State got the first visit. He visited Bama and Georgia after visiting Penn State, and the Nittany Lions still were able to win that recruitment. Aller, obviously, I'm not going to touch on him much more because there's not much more to be said, but I think he was probably – Denai Dennis Sutton was the biggest recruiting win of the Franklin era. I think Drew Aller was the most important win. Tim, I know you and I have said this on the show during the season. For the longest time, Clemson was always Clemson, and then Deshaun Watson came along. This is not to say Drew Aller is going to be Deshaun Watson, but he has the potential and the talent to be Penn State's Deshaun Watson. Other guys in the class who I feel like really don't get enough attention. One is Zane Durant, a 4-star defense tackle out of Florida. The kid plays 6A football in the state of Florida. There's not much high school football in the country. It's better than that. And he had something like 35 tackles for a loss and 20 sacks last year. For Penn State fans, the comparison I always make for him is Kevin Givens, just a little bit bigger and a little more twitchy on the inside. I think Durant is a guy who's going to be a great player for the Nittany Lions. Amari Evans is a player I really like a lot also. Elite speed at the receiver position. He has work to do as a route runner and as a receiver, but man, he's going to run by a lot of defenders. He's going to be a threat in the return game. And, it wouldn't be – you can't talk Penn State football right now without addressing offensive line. And on top of Ione, Drew Shelton, an in-state offensive tackle, top 150 or so kid, really good player. I don't think he plays as a true freshman. Very rarely do offensive lineman plays as a true freshman, but I think he can make an impact very early in his career. And also JB Nelson, the number 1 ranked JUCO offensive lineman in the country, who made a lot of strides this past season at Lackawanna Community College in Scranton. He's also an in-state kid who's originally from Pittsburgh before going to Scranton for community college. I think you could see him contributing the offensive line this year. So there's just so much talent on this roster, or in this recruiting class, excuse me. Abdul Carter is another guy who I think could be an absolute freak for that line defense, who doesn't get talked about very often. I think he can be an absolute game record defensive end in a couple of years. So yeah, there's just, you go up and down this class, there's so much talent. And it's one of those where, yes, there are a lot of people, myself included, who have really, in the last 2 years had question marks about this coaching staff and some of their game day decisions. But you put this kind of talent on your roster, that can really help cover up for any maybe poor in-game decisions, things of that nature. Because ultimately talent wins. And, James Franklin has proven that when he's given a talented roster, he can win a heck of a lot of football games. So I do think that this is a kind of class that, and this is something we'll get into later in the offseason, I'm sure. You look at the 2023 class and the start they're off to, one of the biggest issues with Penn State under James Franklin with recruiting is they've always recruited well. They've never stacked the elite recruiting classes like this. Well, the 2022 class is most certainly elite, and the 2023 class is off to an elite kind of start. So you could see them really starting to turn that corner recruiting wise. And, this may sound crazy, but to constantly rank in the top 12 to 15 recruiting classes, as opposed to consistently ranking that top 5 to 10, is actually a bigger difference than I think a lot of people realize. So if Penn State can turn that corner to consistently sign top 5 to 10 classes, that will make a big difference. And that will close that talent camp with Ohio State a good bit. So yeah, there's a lot of players in this class to be excited about. One thing I will say, if you want to know more about any of these guys, hop over Black Shoe Diaries. We've been, over the course of the last few weeks, Clay Sauertig and Patrick Corbler and I, we really kind of tackled the recruiting news over there. And we've been doing our breakdowns of each player in the class, what we like about the players, maybe any concerns, when we think they can make an impact on the field. So go over there and check it out. We have it for every player in this class.
As someone who played high school sports at a quad A school in Pennsylvania, the idea that there's a 6A is just mind blowing. But it speaks to just how many high schools or athletic programs there are in the state of Florida, and just how much talent there is in that state overall. But just to tack on to your Florida, in addition to Zane Durant, another Florida kid that my interest is piqued by is Katron Allen from IMG Academy, who also dubbed Fat Man by his teammates now because he's a bigger guy, but the guy can move for his size, and he's a powerful bowling ball kind of running back. So, we'll see. I know I talked about how the running back room is ripe for Singleton to, grab it by the horns and become the starter. Don't count out Katron Allen for him to carve out a role for himself in some short yardage situations. They just need to, pick up a yard or two, or just want to throw another wrecking ball of a guy out there at running back. He could be an option. So just figured I'd add that on.
I mean, I know for a lot of reasons this is a bit of a lazy comparison, but I definitely think there could be a lot of similarities to freshman Katron Allen and freshman Noah Kane. Allen may not be quite as explosive as Kane was, but both come from IMG. Both have more of that bigger build and can just barrel a guy over and go get you that yard 2-3 when needed for the first down. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all either to see Katron Allen make an impact. And one other, like I said, you could talk about this class all day, but another guy sticking with the state of Florida, who I think we could potentially see on the field next year is Cam Miller, 4-star cornerback, long, lanky kid, really shined in the offseason, the All-Star games, really shined in the camp circuit last summer. One of those kids that I'm surprised got out of the state of Florida, quite honestly, with his talent. Penn State's deep at cornerback, but there's going to be some playing time available with guys like Tyler Castro-Fields moving on, and it wouldn't stun me to see Miller on the field early in his career either, because the kid's got the length that this coaching staff likes at cornerback and has got some plus athleticism to go with it.
Just to give a metric to what Marty was talking about a few minutes ago with the recruiting rankings, they're not all slots are not created equal. So you would just figure, okay, well, the distance between the number 1 class and the number 10 class is the same as the number 10 class and the number 20 class. If you go through, and this holds true just about every season, if you look at the overall rating given to the entire class, not the average player rating, but the overall, and I think that the average player rating would give you the same type of distance between rankings. If you go between 1 and 13, so the 13th ranked class in the country is a really good class. If you go between 1 and 13, that's the same distance as 13 to 75. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Let that sink in, folks. So the 13th ranked class in the country, which is Kentucky, compared to the number 1 class, which is Texas A&M, is the same difference between taking Kentucky, a 13th ranked class in the country, going all the way to 75. It's like Fresno State or somebody.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. It's where it's so important if you can really turn that corner, become a consistent top 5 to 10 recruiting class. Because you look at the schools who do it. I mean, obviously, you always have your Alabamas, your Georgias, Clemson, Ohio State at the top. But you look at the rest of that, like 5 to 10 range. It's Notre Dame, it's Oklahoma, it's LSU. It's these other schools we see getting into the playoff. It's these other schools we see competing for winning national championships in years it's not Alabama or Clemson, or now Georgia. So it is very important to be in that top 10 or so range. And like I said, Penn State just signed a 6th ranked class. That 2023 class, with the start they're off to, and some of the other guys seem to be in a great position with, should also be able to compete for a top 10 kind of spot. And that's what it takes to get to where your program wants to be in college football.
Big Ten athletic directors got together last week, and they started to look at positioning the Big Ten toward the 12-team college football playoff proposal. In regards to the 2 things that came out of that was, do we dismiss divisions? And number 2, do we go from a 9-game schedule to an 8-game schedule? And maybe we can dice that up at a later date. But in regards to looking at the 2022 schedule, Tim, there were some changes made across the league to kind of deal with some truncated schedules that were the result of COVID in 2020 and so forth. So for Penn State, how does that shake out?
For Penn State, it shook out in a favorable way. I'm sure Marty will agree, because he especially had been pointing out, we have been pointing out during our post-game shows how rough that first half of the original 2022 schedule looked. Well, that's because including those 6 games were back-to-back games against Ohio State and Michigan. Now, thankfully, this new schedule, it's been broken up. So the September slate remains the exact same. They open with a trip to Purdue, and then 2 weeks later they go to Auburn for the return game from last year, and then they have Ohio and Central Michigan at home. But now the big change, first week of October, instead of hosting Ohio State for the whiteout, they host Northwestern, which will be a much more winnable game, at least for that portion of the schedule. And then maybe more importantly, they have a bye week after that before they go on the road to face Michigan October 15th. And then after Michigan, there's a home game of Minnesota sandwiched in between that and what will likely be the whiteout game against Ohio State on the last Saturday of October, the 29th. So, whiteout of Ohio State on Halloween weekend. Wouldn't want to have it any other way. I don't know about you, Marty, but it's I'm sure that'll make for a nice evening.
Yeah, especially because looking at that schedule, I mean, you got to think there's a good shot. Excuse me, Penn State could be looking at 6-1 going into that game, or 6-1. What would it be? How many games? 5, 7? Yeah,
6-1. Yeah, because I guess we figure they lose if maybe Michigan's the most likely loss.
Yeah, that's because you look at add Jordan Hare's never easy, but man, Auburn's a freaking dumpster fire right now. Can't keep coaches, can't keep players on their roster. At Purdue's not going to be easy to start the year, especially with Jeff Brom, terrific coaching staff there with the Boilermakers, but they lost a lot. And
not as daunting as going to Madison to open the season.
No, absolutely not. And Northwestern's never easy because that's what Pat Fitzgerald does. It's like playing Iowa. He's going to suck you down to a 19-17 game or something like that. But Minnesota could be challenging, especially that's got trap game written all over it.
Revenge.
Yeah, especially sandwiched between Michigan and Ohio State. But man, if Penn State can be 6-1 going into that whiteout on Halloween weekend, that's going to be one jacked up Beaver Stadium. win, lose, or draw. That's going to be a lot of fun and a great atmosphere that night. But yeah, the changes to the schedule definitely benefit Penn State because you look at their schedule now. There's a real opportunity. They go to the Big House on October 15th at 5-0. I'd argue that they're definitely going to be their first 5 games. Obviously, other than maybe Auburn, they're definitely more talented than every team they play. And even Auburn, I got to think at this point with the transfer portal, it's that Penn State's more talented than they are. So, yeah,
I'm going to wait and see on Auburn. I mean, it's easy. It's only February. It's easy for us to sit back, I guess, and point and laugh at the disarray going on.
Fair
but
enough. At least it's February.
But I mean, you never know. And again, you still got to go down to Jordan Hare. What'll probably be a night game, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And that's rabid atmosphere. I mean, you never know. I mean, it's just hard to say. It's a little far out, but I will say, I guess I mean, I still call it a toss up, to be fair, but maybe it doesn't feel as daunting as it did maybe a few months ago.
Yeah, I think even you go to the end of the Outback Bowl and that Auburn game looks more winnable than it did then, especially more winnable than it did at the end of the regular season, I think. So it's just nice to see because as people who are not Penn State fans may not truly appreciate, the Big Ten seems to just give Penn State the short end of the stick anytime they can scheduling. Because what is this, Tim? I think like the 5th or 6th year, maybe even more in a row, they've started Big Ten play on the road. So it was just nice to see them actually benefit from a schedule change for once and to get that Northwestern game early in the season and then get Michigan and Ohio State broken up with a bye week.
Well, they do start Big Ten play on the road again.
Yeah. But I mean, like you said, no knock on Purdue because I have no doubts they'll be a good football team just because their coaching staff. But I'd much rather start at Purdue than at Madison. So
that'll be the first game. Well, granted, okay, I guess they look pretty good in the bowl game against Tennessee without David Bell or George Karlaftis. But again, you gotta, still gonna be some big changes.
Yeah,
I know they lost.
You kind of throw things out the window too. So,
I mean, I'd rather be catching it. I'll just say this: I'd rather be going to them for game 1 than game 10 or So actually, the week after Ohio State, they have to go to Bloomington to face Indiana, which is almost always a pain in the butt of a contest.
Yeah.
Even though Penn State typically comes out there victorious, it's never, it's never a easy afternoon there.
I honestly cannot tell you the last time Penn State had an easy win at Indiana. I have no idea.
Back to I mean, I guess it's might be a bit of a reach too, but I would say maybe 2002 when Larry Johnson ran for over 300 yards on him.
Yeah.
But I mean, that was kind of a close game in the first half, but Penn State just kind of pulled away with LJ.
I mean, even you look at 2016 when Penn State won the Big Ten, what the Indiana game was something like 52 to 42.
They were down at the end of the third quarter. They were trailing.
Yeah. It took that. There was a late strip sack where Penn State housed it to put the game on ice like a minute and a half to go, but Indiana had the ball down and scored like a minute and a half to go. It's never easy in Bloomington for whatever reason.
No, it never is. And then they finish with Maryland at home, on the road at Rutgers, and then what I like, especially, they end the year with Michigan State at home, just like the good old days.
Yeah, that's very much nostalgia feel to finish the season up with the Land Grant Trophy.
Penn State football talk. So join Tim Aiden, Marty Leap, Black Shoe Diaries. Get the full take from day to day right there, wrapping up the recruiting class for 2022, one of the best in the country. Guys, as always, appreciate you stopping by.